Welcome to episode 281 of the Various and Sundry podcast. I'm your host, Matt Harmon, joined live from the Vault Studio, the beautiful campus of Grace College and Grace Theological Seminary, by my good friend, my colleague, my co-host, and the man who does not like to be called Josh.
I don't.
John Scott Sloat.
Well, and I might say, with my co-host, Matt Harmon, the fired up Matt Harmon this morning. You're a little hot under the collar this morning. It'll be interesting to see if it comes out in the episode.
I don't know. Well, you got me worked up talking about a specific issue.
I just asked a question
here on campus.
I'm by nature curious.
Yeah.
I ask questions.
Yeah.
And things go wild.
Yeah, you
pressed a button.
You did press a button. That's for sure.
Underneath the surface, you were very calm when I ran into you this morning.
Yeah. You turned up the dial. That's for sure.
Speaking of which, you have very college professor summer garb going on right now.
You think?
I'm looking at a striped hoodie.
Yeah.
T-shirt.
Yeah.
Got the glass. Jeans? Are we jeans?
You got jeans? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
I think I saw a professor walking around in shorts today.
Yeah. I mean, it's not quite warm enough for me to wear shorts today. Like it's overcast. It's,
It's drizzly.
A little gray.
Yeah. I have my umbrella with me. Just in case.
Yes, indeed. So we are recording this one in advance of when it will launch.
I'm on vacation. You're in Omaha when this drops, right?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
I'm in Florida. You're in Omaha.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we'll let the listener judge which location is a more desirable location to be in.
Okay. Yeah. Let them judge.
Yeah. So,
well, you're kind of going out. Are you going out during the College World Series?
I think that's later.
Okay.
I don't think we're to that point yet in the year.
Okay. That would be a pretty desirable time to be in Omaha.
That would, and the family that I have that's out there has gone, and it's a great experience.
That's what I hear.
So maybe someday, but not this trip. All right, if you would like to contact the show, you can find us on X at VNSPod. You can email the show variousandsundrypodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook and on YouTube, and we would love for you to leave a 5-star rating as well as a review.
Write something.
Yeah. It can be, it can be serious. It can be snarky. It can be funny. There's a whole range of options.
Yeah, could admire us, could trash us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any of the above.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so even though we're a little far out recording this, let's talk briefly about – so we're recording this on the Wednesday before this drops, so almost a full week. But
almost a full week. There
was a big NBA playoff development. Pacers closed out the Cavs last night.
Wow.
In 5 games. That's crazy.
I did not have that on the bingo card. Yeah.
No. And the Thunder went up 3-2 on the Nuggets. We'll see, by the time this episode drops, those series will be over regardless. We'll be on to the conference finals.
Which will be fun.
With your beloved, presumably your beloved
I don't want to presume anything.
Knickerbockers.
Yes. Shortly after we finished the pod, Tatum, it was announced.
Did in fact.
Well, because we leaked it on the pod first.
Yes.
It was finally announced by the Celtics.
Yes.
That he ruptured his Achilles.
Yeah.
Which, not good, Bob.
No. And, I mean, the track record of guys coming back and being what they were before their Achilles tear or rupture is very – I mean, I don't know that anybody's ever come back and been exactly as good or better than they were. And now Kobe tore his, and he came back and he was still Kobe.
Yeah. I mean, there's –
But, I mean, Klay Thompson, didn't he tear his?
I think so.
And he's not the same player.
No. There was coupled with a knee injury in there as well, I think.
Right.
So, but yeah, Knicks play Boston tonight in Boston.
Tonight as we record this, yes.
Yeah, Wednesday.
I think the Knicks will lose the game. this would be game 5.
5? But you think they win in?
I think they win in New York in
Okay.
game 6. I think the Celtics will rally around. It's sort of the we've lost our superstar, backs against the wall, home floor.
Well, and I imagine it's a different style of basketball you play without a Jason Tatum on the floor.
Probably.
And the Knicks are going to have to adjust
Yeah.
to that style of basketball.
You wanted to bring in a sports note.
So it happened, I believe, yesterday
Okay.
that Major League Baseball lifted the lifetime ban on Pete Rose
Okay.
and Shoeless Joe Jackson.
So, in essence, what's significant about that is that it paves the way for them to be inducted into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think we all kind of knew that was going to happen with Pete Rose, right? That they were waiting for Pete Rose to die.
Yes.
That they weren't going to give him the satisfaction of it happening in his lifetime.
Correct. That was kind of – I think we've probably even talked about that on pod before.
Yeah.
That was sort of our presumption.
Mm-hmm. But Shoeless Joe,
Yeah.
that was a bit of a surprise, don't you think? And you have a dark conspiracy theory that explains why. Why Shoeless Joe?
So it was one I read on the internet.
Well, it must be true then.
It's very interesting to me that we name an American pope. What, a week ago?
Yeah, something like that.
And a week later, who is from Chicago? Who
And a White Sox fan.
and a White Sox fan. And a week later, the ban on Shoeless Joe Jackson goes away.
I see.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
This is the Vatican meddling in American affairs.
I see.
Do you think the Pope called Rob Manfred and requested this?
I mean, probably. Probably.
It seems like the most likely.
That is clearly the most likely explanation of these events. Yeah, I mean, clearly you've been taking notes from the how to create a tweet or Twitter thread that builds a conspiracy theory, and this is exactly how you do it.
So some conspiracy theories, I just roll my eyes at because I'm like, there's just no way that's possible. This is one of them, but this is funny.
Yeah.
But Shoeless Joe batted 400 in that series that he supposedly threw.
Yeah.
And led all scorers, I believe, had a certain number of runs, certain number of RBIs.
What was the name? Is the movie that was it 8 Men Out
I think so. I think it's 8 Men Out.
or 9 Men? There's a number.
Yes.
It's like either 8 Men Out, 9 Men Out. Maybe it was 8.
I'm Googling.
But and Ray Liotta's in that movie. Was he Shoeless Joe?
He might have been. Yeah, looks like it's 8 Men Out.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess that makes sense. So one guy one guy exempted from the sort of the anyway. So yes, now that we've unmasked this,
Charlie Sheen was in that movie.
yeah, we've unmasked the this deep conspiracy here.
D.B. Sweeney played Shoeless Joe Jackson.
Okay. I thought Ray Liotta was in that movie.
So Ray Liotta was. You might be thinking
Field of
of
Dreams.
Field of Dreams.
That's
Ray
what I'm
Liotta's
thinking,
in Field of Dreams. Christopher Lloyd is in that movie.
Yeah.
8 Men Out. Who else?
I feel like I need to go back and see Field of Dreams again. Like it's been a while
it's a
since
good
I've watched
movie.
it. It holds up.
It's a very good movie.
It holds up over time, I think. Yeah.
Very, very good movie. One other thing I'll mention. We haven't talked about the Pope.
Well, we just did.
Well, you talked about an aspect of the Pope. What do you think? I was always told an American Pope was impossible.
Okay.
What are you making of an American Pope?
I don't know what to make of it. Do you have a take on that?
No. Outside of the internet memes and jokes, I don't have I am not in the papal weeds, so I do not know what's happening in the current state of affairs of the papacy.
So you're saying your sources don't extend inside the Vatican to
I wish. My goodness, could you imagine the fundraising I could do inside the Vatican?
for a Protestant school?
I'm very convincing. No. I mean, I just think it's interesting. I was always told, "Oh, we'll never have an American pope." Now, you could argue that we don't have an American pope currently because he's been in Peru for so long. Mm-hmm. He's really a Peruvian pope.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen people trying to read the tea leaves, so to speak, in terms of like, they've looked at like his brother's social media and like, oh, his brother seems to be relatively conservative-ish, or like this guy's a registered Republican. Like, okay, I don't know that tells us anything.
No,
really.
you could not base my politics based on my siblings.
So, yeah, I don't know.
Do you think we call this era? You know how when the papacy moved to Avignon, France?
No.
So the papacy for a period of time moved to a small town in France called Avignon. They called it the Babylon captivity of the papacy, or the Avignon papacy. Okay. I want to refer to this period as the Chicagoan papacy.
Yeah.
The Chicagoan captivity of the church.
Well, I mean, anyone who's familiar with Chicago politics, good night. I mean, yeah.
He may be a mob member. Is that what you're saying?
Could be. I don't know. I mean, was he – how big of a deal was he – like, how far up in the Catholic Church was he when he was actually in Chicago? Because he was, like you said, he was in Peru for a while.
But I think he came back to Chicago for like 10 years. So I think he was in Chicago for a recent period and clearly still has ties to the city because there's video of him at the White Sox World Series game.
That's 20 years ago.
Right. But let's say he did 10 years in Chicago and then has been in Rome as a cardinal for the last 10 years.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, Chicago is just such a corrupt city in terms of its government. I mean, and not just the city of Chicago, but even like the state government in Illinois is, like basically if somebody leaves office, not because they've been indicted or just mired in like corruption scandals, people are like, whoa, hey, wow. Or more like they just haven't found the right dirt yet. They haven't looked in the right closets.
But I think referring to this as the Chicagoan papacy, okay. the Chicagoan captivity of the church.
Okay. I mean, if he's going to bring deep dish pizza to the Vatican, I mean,
see, this is where you and I disagree. I'm not a big deep dish fan.
That's because you're New York roots.
It's not pizza. It's pizza casserole.
No, stop it. Stop it.
Which is good in its own standing.
Stop. I will not sit for such slander. I think we need to move on before this really gets heated.
Boy, who knew the papacy could divide us so strongly?
Yeah. Who could have seen that coming? When has the papacy ever been a divisive issue in history? So, all right. So today we are continuing our summer read, and we are working our way through Tim Keller on the Christian Life, The Transforming Power of the Gospel by Matt Smethurst, graciously provided to us for free by our friends at Crossway.
The good people at Crossway.
Yeah, go buy their books.
They have good books.
Yeah. Go to their website. Lots of good stuff.
We're big fans of Crossway.
Sign up you can become like a Crossway member and get discounts and all kinds of stuff.
So wait, question for you. I know you're a Crossway author.
Yeah.
Am I technically a Crossway author?
No.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
I was thinking based on – because is Crossway publishing the Gospel Coalition commentary that we did?
You mean the print copy?
Yes, the print copy. I thought I got an email saying that I was considered maybe I have author's discounts maybe at Crossway now?
Maybe. I don't know.
I don't know. I in the back of my mind, I remember some email.
I didn't remember that Crossway was doing the print versions.
Okay,
of
maybe
the
I'm
Gospel
misremembering
Coalition.
I know there's a
you could be
print
right.
version coming out.
There is, yes. And Crossway makes the most sense
I agree.
because Crossway and TGC work together pretty closely. So, in any case, this is a fine Crossway book.
This is a great Crossway book.
By Matt Smethers.
Well designed, well written.
Good hardback. So, we are in chapters 3 and 4 today.
3 and 4.
And you'll want to check last episode out for chapters 1 and 2. So chapter 3 is entitled 3 Ways to Live, Why Religion Needs Grace. So initial thoughts on this chapter here.
After I finished the first 2 chapters, my number one reflection is we have not talked about the prodigal son.
And then you turn the page to chapter 3.
And then I turned the page to chapter 3, and here we are.
Yep.
Because this is such a central piece of Keller's teaching and even model for ministry in a lot of ways, and how he thinks about how to communicate the gospel. The prodigal son is central.
Yeah.
And, he wrote a great book about it.
Yep.
So this is the chapter where he gets into that.
Yeah.
So that was my first thought coming into the chapter, and then he gets into it here.
Yes. Yeah. So he frames the chapter as kind of a development of a very common way to kind of frame. Even talks about the gospel tract 2 Ways to Live. Have you ever seen that?
I think so. Yeah.
He talks about Keller tweaking it in essence and talking about, well, actually there's 3 ways to live. Mm-hmm. But I see that more as, well, there's still only 2 ways to live. It's just one of those ways has 2 kind of
2 prongs,
subcategories underneath it.
Yeah.
So I don't think they're clearly not saying something.
I mean,
fundamentally different.
His first sentence here, the gospel tract 2 Ways to Live, is superb.
Mm-hmm.
He clearly agrees with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So the framing it that way, so 2 ways to live, either basically, you're either for Christ or against Christ. You either submit to him or you don't, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And then Keller kind of expands on that and talks about how, in essence, there are 2 ways to run away from to God. In other words, 2 ways to live man's way versus God's way. And so the first one is unapologetic idolatry, basing these in Romans. I live for myself and I'm proud of it. And then the other, though, is, as he calls it more subtle, religious hypocrisy. I live for myself and nobody can find out. Mm-hmm. So I think elsewhere you might see him or others use the term of legalism or licentiousness, kind of those 2 extremes.
Yeah. Or libertine, I think he uses from time to time.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So what do you think of that as a framework?
As a person that most naturally struggles with legalism, and I love a good system. I love rules.
Yeah.
I love following them. I love getting praise for following them. I think this is part of Keller's teaching and really part of the Reformed tradition's teaching that I think resonates with me most deeply.
Yeah, I think the first time that I kind of saw this for myself in the text of Scripture was actually in Galatians. And working through Galatians and recognizing that even in Galatians, Paul talks about life according to the flesh, but he does it in 2 ways. And in essence, we hear the expression, living according to the flesh, and we think basically of like Galatians 5, where like these are the works of the flesh, and it's like all these
younger brother type.
Yeah, younger brother type, where it's like flagrant, blatant immorality,
living among the pigs,
rejection of God's ways in every conceivable sense. Like,
right.
Yep, that's it. But if you look earlier in Galatians, there's another way to live according to the flesh, and that's by trying to earn God's favor by keeping his commandments.
Yeah.
Like that's another form of living according to the flesh, and it looks very different on the outside. At the root, it's the same. But at the end of the outward presentation of that is almost completely opposite.
Yeah, yeah. One thing in this chapter that struck me, and I don't think I'd ever heard it before, was in the section entitled Evangelistic Value on 56 and 57.
Yeah.
Matt raises the point that, why did Keller preach so much about the sort of legalism out there?
Yeah.
He's in New York City.
Right.
Not a ton of legalists out there, but a ton of libertines.
Right. You would expect that to be a bigger staple if you're preaching in the Bible Belt somewhere in Alabama, Mississippi, or
Matt Chandler's ministry in Texas,
yeah.
Right? You would expect that to be a bigger feature. And he goes to this quote from John Piper that really struck me. I won't read the whole thing, but I'll try to summarize it, that he heard Keller say that libertine people need to hear preaching against legalism. And Piper just goes, "What on earth are you talking about, Tim?"
Yeah.
And he goes, "That's really not their problem." But Keller's point was, if you only preach against the libertine, or you only preach against, I'm not going to try to say the other word, licentiousness. Did I get that right?
You got
it. There's always a first time for everything.
Or you could just go younger brother.
Younger brother syndrome.
Yeah.
He goes, they'll just turn into older brothers. And I thought, I had never heard it put that clearly, and I thought that was really good.
Yeah. Yeah, the fact that that's a really helpful observation in terms of once you convince the younger brother type, yeah, that's bad. That's disastrous. That's going to lead you to destruction. If you don't, they're not going to understand the goodness of the gospel unless you show them the false alternative of that's not going to work. Like trying to become religious, trying to become someone who keeps the rules and shapes up your own life and does all that. Like that's not the answer. Which I think that's very insightful from Keller. And I think that good preaching in today's world needs to address both.
Yeah, 100%.
And I would say that's not just even for evangelistic preaching. That's for living the Christian life.
Absolutely.
Preaching. That we as Christians can be tempted in either of those directions to pursue our own sinful desires in ways that are obviously contrary to God's ways.
Sure.
Or we can be tempted to think that our performance is what has gained us our right standing with God, or that we're earning more of God's pleasure, or that God owes us. Like, hey, I'm doing all this stuff for you, God. So, therefore I shouldn't probably really suffer in this life.
Give me the fatted calf.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I've kept all your commands, and you've never once given me a little goat for me to celebrate with my, that the bitterness builds up, that you don't get what you think you deserve. So I think that's part of the genius of this chapter is to have those two, in essence, those become almost like guardrails in terms of preaching and teaching and thinking about the Christian life that I think help us stay on the path of faithfulness that says, yes, obedience matters. Like Keller's not saying don't obey,
Right.
but he's saying make sure that your motivation for obedience is the right one, and make sure you understand that the product of your obedience, like the outcome of your obedience, is not right standing with God. It's not earning you something. So yeah, I think that's really insightful. And yes, there's all sorts of little snippets from Luke 15, prodigal son stuff.
Yes. He needed a chapter basically on the prodigal sons.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
It would have felt like something's off here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think when you consider the popularity of that book and just how helpful it is, and the fact that, contextually, the emphasis in the context of Luke 15 is more on the older brother than it is on the younger.
Yeah,
that's valuable. And when I've taught on the passage, it's certainly I've been very much influenced by the way Keller does it. I just think it's fascinating that when you look at it, and I actually use this as part of my introduction typically when I teach on this, that there are two ways to be lost. You can either know it or not.
Yeah.
Right? We've all had that experience of maybe more before the days of, Google Maps and that kind of stuff, but driving in the wrong direction. And so you have no idea that you're actually lost or going the wrong way. So you're, just, ignorantly headed in the wrong direction there. And that's honestly the most dangerous kind of being lost when you don't know it. Just like the most dangerous, if you have cancer, arguably the most dangerous position to be in is when you don't know it. Yeah. And if you persist in not knowing it because the disease continues on, it continues to deteriorate your body, you're not aware of it, But if you're aware of it, all of a sudden it's, okay, in most cases, there are treatment options. We have some opportunities to maybe get out in front of this, to take care of this, to, give you a good outcome. So,
or at least extend right. Your life.
Yeah. So I think that that passage is helpful in raising that issue of you can look like a very observant religious person and be just as lost as the younger brother. Mm-hmm. And in some ways more lost because you don't realize it. So yeah, I feel like right out of the gate here, these first three chapters, I'm like, yeah, those are the three things I'm probably most – when I think of Keller, those three are probably the most immediately to mind.
Yeah. Did you feel that way about chapter 4?
No. I liked chapter 4.
Yeah. He doesn't have a book on this topic.
Right. And that's part of it, right? I mean, you tend to identify people at some level with what they've written books on. Yeah. And he did not write a book on friendship.
Now, if you listen to the Gospel Life podcast, friendship is a regular feature of his preaching. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say it's as constant as the first three. Really, the first one, Jesus is the central hero to all of Scripture.
It's in everything he does.
So it's central to his preaching, but there's not a sermon topic on it outside of maybe a Gospel Coalition sermon, right?
Right.
But idolatry is certainly a major feature.
Yep.
The younger brother, elder brother is certainly a feature. And friendship, I would say, is probably a tier below that.
Okay.
But is definitely a major feature of what he has to preach. And one of the reflections I had coming out of the first three chapters was I was like, I think we've only had one C.S. Lewis quote.
Well, chapter 4 is for you, John. Because
chapter 4 definitely did the trick.
All about Lewis.
And I found myself looking at it, having listened to several of Keller's sermons on friendship and going, all right, we hit Frankenstein. That's a pretty common one he uses. Mm-hmm. he doesn't get into this. And then, he does later in the chapter, So,
Yeah.
He does a really masterful job here. What did you think of the chapter coming at this fresh for Tim?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think I was probably most struck. Again, you've read and listened to more Keller than I have, but I think I was probably most struck by the. Again, this is a story about C.S. Lewis. This is on page 64. And he tells the story of how, there was a trio of them, right? There was him, there was Tolkien, and then another man, Charles Williams.
Yeah.
And they were kind of this well-known trio of friends. And then Williams dies. And basically, Lewis, in essence, kind of has something of a selfish thought of like, oh, well, I get more of Tolkien now.
Yeah.
Because I'm not sharing him with another friend.
Mm-hmm.
And what he realizes, and then he summarizes, Lewis quote here on page 64, in each of my friends there's something that only some other friend can fully bring out. By myself, I am not large enough to call the whole man into activity. I need other lights than my own to show all his facets. Now that Charles is dead, I shall never again see Ronald's. So Ronald was what Tolkien went by. Ronald's reaction to a specifically Caroline joke. Far from having more of Ronald, having him to myself, now that Charles is away, I have less of Ronald. Which is an interesting, and I think very true.
Yeah, yeah. It's a stunningly good point by Lewis.
Yeah, it is. And, I think we all probably have experienced that. But even just, I think about, I'll use an example. Like, I think there's a dynamic that happens when you get a group of friends together that doesn't happen individually typically, right? Mm-hmm. So, if we're in if you and me are in a room with Nate from Ohio, Zach from Ohio, and even Brent from Indiana, and you put us all in a room, there's a dynamic that is there that is that's just different.
Gets dialed up.
Yeah, like it intensifies, I think, the realities of each person. Because each person might be able to like Lewis says, they're like bring out an element in that other person that maybe nobody else can quite as well. They just know quite, they know the buttons to push and they know the looks to give and all that kind of stuff that bring that out.
Or the stories to tell.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, for sure.
What did you make of his 3 ingredients? So he had 3 ingredients for friendship. Now he said Matt and Keller said that these 3 ingredients are for friendships generally, not necessarily Christian friendships, and there's an additional one. But what did you think of the 3 ingredients? Sort of that, I don't love the word sympathy, but common passion is sort of how he defines that. Authenticity or transparency, and then constancy for friendship.
Yeah.
Did you have any particular reflections on those? I will say for myself, hearing these in sermons, I don't know if I've done this very intentionally, but when I think of how to stay in touch with out-of-town friends, I think of these 3 things. Like, what do I talk about when I talk about, like what common passion do I talk about with people that I don't see regularly?
Yep.
What can I share with them about myself? Sort of that authenticity or that transparency. And then how regularly do I need to contact them?
Yeah.
So I do think through those things when I think that. Now, I will say I am blessed with an hour drive home every day, and that's
Yeah.
great times to dial the phone before people get home for dinner.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think those three elements are very very apt. Like you, I'm not a huge fan of the term sympathy, but as he, explains it, common passion. In other words, essentially common interest.
Yeah, common interest.
Which makes sense. And then, transparency. Yes. There has to be some measure of openness.
Yeah.
Of what's going on in your life and sharing that. And then constancy. I think the irony is that in some ways you would think it'd be easier in our contemporary moment with the ease of communication. And in some ways it can be more challenging, I think.
Absolutely.
I think part of what – and I think I can't remember if we've talked about this on pod or off pod, but I think part of the challenge with this is each person has a relational limit.
Yeah.
And when you feel like you've basically reached your relational capacity of I have my friends. Like these are my people. That it can be challenging then to if you're in context where you're continuing to meet more people or there are more demands on you or more efforts by others to build friendships with you when it's like I don't know that I have the capacity to have that level of friendship with any more people than I probably already have it.
Yeah.
So there have to be
there has to be a mutual constancy.
There does, and I also think there needs to be degrees of friendship.
Mm-hmm.
Like to me, this sounds like pretty deep friendship.
Yeah.
Where I would say, I've probably got a handful of people in my life that probably fall into this category. But I can't have that level of friendship with 20 people.
Mm-hmm.
I can't do it. I'm just not.
You have limits on your time and day.
And even just
desire,
relational capacity. I'm sorry, I can't.
Yeah.
So there are degrees of friendship. I think
absolutely.
that this doesn't quite account for. This seems to me to be describing more what I would call a deeper level of friendship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's fair. He does take this and turn it to talking about the church.
Yes,
and I thought that was a really good turn.
Mm-hmm.
Taking this vision of friendship and moving it to the weekly gathering.
Yes. Again, though, where I struggle with that to some degree is wanting to say there have to be degrees of this.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can't be that level of friend with 30 people, 50 people, 100 people.
Sure.
So that there has to be in one sense, a light version of this, a friendship light version. If we're going to call this friendship, then there has to be a light version of this. That's that person is a friend, but I don't know deeply what's going on in their life. But I go out of my way to say hi to them at church on Sundays, maybe, and occasionally text them or do something with them, but not don't have a great grasp of what's deeply going on in their life.
I do think, as we become more isolated as a society, I do think this teaching is important, right?
Yeah. But this gets back to, and I know we've talked about this, how do you build this? How do you build this in a church?
Yeah. I don't know.
Because at the end of the day, you probably are going to need to start having more and more structured opportunities for people to spend time together.
Mm-hmm.
But
or do you preach about this a ton? Is this an application regularly in the form of preaching that comes and let this happen organically throughout the church at programs you're already doing?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, but you're just going to have people who are not going to take initiative to do this.
Yes.
You're going to have people who are like, they might even think, gosh, I think I'd click with Joe. It'd feel awkward for me to go over and go, hey, you wanna grab coffee sometime? Mm-hmm. Or like, hey, do you want to go to a ball game together?
Yeah.
Like, some people just aren't going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so they just sort of suffer quietly with lack of friends.
Yeah.
Lack of friendship. But so I don't know what the answer to that is. I really don't. And, as I mentioned earlier, like what's the – you can be put in awkward positions if someone's pursuing friendship with you at this kind of level and you're like, no. Like I really don't think I either want to or have that relational capacity right now to –
I don't have a need for friends at the moment. I don't have an opening right now.
Yeah, I don't have an opening. I'm sorry. All those positions are filled.
Yeah.
But again, he ties it at the end of this chapter to the beauty of the gospel is that Jesus calls us friends.
That's right.
And lets us in. And so, it's a really good chapter. I think that these are 4 strong chapters to start the book for sure.
And next week,
chapters 5 and 6,
faith goes to work.
Yep.
And do justice, love mercy.
Yeah.
He had a couple books on those.
He did. So, read those for next week. Time now for This Day in Sports History.
All right, this day in sports history, May the 20th. May the 20th. Wow. I know. We always ooh and awe at the date and how it progresses. Is there anything more common, than
It's
the
pretty
calendar?
Old manish, too, to be honest. We talk about the weather on this pod, and we talk about, man, years going by fast.
Calendar's flying. May 20th, 1900. Nice round year there.
Yeah.
Second modern Olympics takes place. Games of the Second Olympiad open in Paris and continue for 5 months.
Yeah, that's a long time.
I assume, did they have more sports? Probably not.
I wouldn't think so. Maybe they just are working with less facilities, and so you have to use facilities for more things. Like, surely you don't have athletes going there for 5 months. Like, it's like, okay, we'll do track and field. Come for the first 2 weeks.
Or is it like, all right, for this 2.5 month period, we're going to do summer sports. And for this 2.5 month period, we're going to do the winter sports.
Well, if it opens in May of 1900, that gets you to October. That's not going to get you winter sports.
No, that's not going to get you winter. I mean, I'm not familiar with Paris's climate, but I can't imagine it's very different than ours.
I think it's pretty similar-ish.
Well, that's a mystery then. What did they do for 5 months?
I don't know.
1948, Cleveland Indians tie AL record with a record of 18 walks, and they beat the Red Sox 13-4. When you get on base, good things happen.
That's true.
When you get on base, good things happen. 1972, 5th ABA championship. The Pacers beat the Nets 4-2.
The ABA.
Yeah. What teams came from the ABA? Obviously the Pacers, the Nets, Spurs?
I don't know.
Okay.
Did they?
1984, Boston's Roger Clemens beats the Twins 5-4 for his first victory ever.
Did he end up with 300 wins? He did, didn't he?
I believe so. Yeah. He pitched for forever. He pitched in the 2000s, I think.
Yeah.
He was with the Yankees at that time. And he's kind of the ultimate villain.
Yeah.
1988, the Phillies. Boy. I hate it when things start that way. Mike Schmidt hits his 535th home run, moving into 8th place all time.
Any idea where Mike Schmidt went to college?
I have no clue, but based on the fact you're asking that question, was it Ohio University?
It was. He was a Bobcat. That's
Really?
right. Yeah.
Is there any other Bobcats that are more well accomplished than him athletically? You're obviously more accomplished than him.
Yeah.
But
I don't think so.
he feels like he's at the top. Does he come back to campus?
Now that I don't know.
Okay. Feels like he needs to be a donor to OU.
You would think. Did you know? Did I mention this? Like, I think I'm going to end up speaking at OU's fall retreat
Oh, for crew.
for crew.
I thought you were going to drop commencement.
Oh yeah, give me a break.
I was like, what?
Give me a break. Yeah.
Well, that's great. That's kind of a full circle moment for you.
Yeah.
Anybody still there from when you were there? Probably not.
No.
You know, we have a Grace grad on staff there.
At OU?
Yeah, OU crew.
We do?
Yeah, or at least the wife of somebody on staff there.
Huh. You have to tell me after pod.
Yeah. I'll tell you off pod. I lost my spot. 2003.
Yes.
Laurus World Sports Awards. Is that how that's pronounced?
My guess is Laureus.
Laureus? Grimaldi Forum, Monaco. Did Monaco come up yesterday? Or last week on the pod?
Yes.
Okay.
Because we were talking about Formula One, F1.
Yes. Sportsman Lance Armstrong rescinded. Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh. Sportsman of the Year, I assume.
Yes.
Lance Armstrong rescinded.
Yeah.
Yikes. And sportswoman Serena Williams.
Mm-hmm.
Team of the Year, Brazil men's national football team.
Yeah. All right. So who do you like out of that, John?
Lance Armstrong. Just kidding.
Yeah.
Do we go with OU grad Mike Schmidt? As much as I hate the Phillies,
I'm down with that.
feels like that's the closest connection we have to either of us.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Let's do it.
Okay, Mike Schmidt it is.
All right. One thing you liked.
Okay, so when we record back to back like this, my life's not that interesting that I can come up with another one thing that I really enjoyed in this week. But I have something.
I'm going to confess that when I first heard you say that sentence, I thought you said my wife is not that interesting. And then I realized contextually you said life.
My wife is very interesting.
I'm aware. I just thought, wow, that's an interesting thing to say in the pod.
Yeah.
No.
My life is not that
Life.
interesting. So it's hard to come up with something. I will plug a travel app I've started using
All right.
called Flighty. And it logs every flight I've ever had. So it goes through my email and plugs in every flight. So I can see the number of miles I've traveled. I can see the number of hours of delays I've had. It's not.
Do you want to know that?
And it breaks it down by year as well. Wow. So it'll go through.
Yeah.
But the other thing it does is it tells me when I travel to, like I have a connection, if it's a relaxed connection, if it's a tight connection, if I'm going to have struggles getting from one gate to the next. Wow. It will also tell me, like I had a flight out of D.C. last week, and they stopped allowing flights to come in to Reagan for about 90 minutes for whatever reason.
Huh.
And they kept telling me, oh, yeah, we're going to start boarding in 20 minutes. And I'm looking at the flight app going, no, my plane is still in Westchester, New York.
Yeah.
It is not here.
You're not boarding in 20 minutes.
And so it would give me projection times of when the plane would actually take off that are not published by the airlines, things like that. That really, really helpful.
Nice.
Flighty is the name of the app.
Okay. Flighty. All right. No, not Flightly. Flight-E. Okay.
Flight-E.
Okay.
Yes, there's a free version and a paid version. I just upgraded to the paid version.
Okay.
So.
All right. So my one thing I liked is so this is I guess more than a week ago, but my wife and I attended a fundraising dinner for the school where she teaches.
Oh, nice.
They're doing a building campaign.
Yeah.
And, as these events often do, they have silent auctions. And so I bid repeatedly and won this bundle of that included a really nice vacuum and like a portable like work light kind of thing, like LED.
Okay. Yeah.
Had a really nice like rechargeable. That's rechargeable. All these are rechargeable things. Rechargeable flashlight that's really bright and everything. And so we get home and we're like, okay, let's look up this vacuum because it was a brand I hadn't heard of. The brand is Miele, Miele or Miele. I'm not sure.
Okay.
And like I was curious, like how much is this vacuum worth? I felt bad. It was worth more than I bid. And it's a really, really good vacuum.
That's funny.
Like highly rated. Like I think it's a German company.
It sounds like a German company.
Yeah, Miele or Miele, something like that. But it's one of those vacuums that has a lot of different attachments. It has a battery that charges, so you're not bound by a cord.
Yeah, love that.
And it is like, I mean, this vacuum sucks in the best sense of that word. That's like the only product that you really want to suck, and it's
yeah.
So it is fabulous. Absolutely, highly recommend it if you can afford it. They're not cheap. So if you ever see one of those at a silent auction, start bidding on that thing.
Start bidding.
Yes. Huh. Yep. So Miele, Miele, M-I-E-L-E vacuum.
Nice.
Very, very, very good. So that is my one thing I liked. All right, John, we have talked some NBA playoffs. We've talked about your papal conspiracy to get Shoeless Joe Jackson into the Hall of Fame. Talked about Tim Keller on the Christian Life Part 2. Don't forget to read chapters 5 and 6 for next time. We talked about Ohio University graduate Mike Schmidt. Well, I don't know if he graduated. I'm assuming he did.
Alum. Because anybody with 3 credit hours is an
with
alum.
3 credit hours, okay. Really? So that makes me... So I'm an alum of the University of Chicago?
If you took 3 credits there.
I did.
Oh, well, I don't know if that's how... University of Chicago's a little hoity-toity. That's how we define alum.
See, okay.
And that's how lots of universities define alum.
Okay. We talked about the flight app Flighty.
Yeah, I have 29 hours lost from delays.
Yikes.
Lifetime.
And we talked about me winning a silent auction and my Miele vacuum. So I think, by definition, we have covered our various and sundry topics. And so all that's left to say is, until next time, the Lord bless y'all real good.
Later.